Right now, heat arrives without a fight. You didn't hunt anything for the coat by your door, and food in your kitchen stays edible next week no matter how hard the wind blows outside. Now strip that away. Bare skin, and a winter cold enough to kill you in your sleep before dawn. That was normal for hundreds of thousands of years, through real ice ages that buried entire continents. Every one of your direct ancestors made it through enough of those winters to pass life forward. You are the proof. So how did a soft, hairless animal built for African heat survive the coldest conditions this planet ever threw at a human? Let's be honest about the scale, because Ice Age sounds like a cold afternoon. It wasn't. The last glacial maximum peaked around 26,000 to 19,000 years ago. Ice sat directly on Europe, Asia, and North America. The land was flat, frozen, and open, with nothing to break the wind, and food could vanish for months. Biologically, humans aren't built for that. No thick fur, no blubber like a seal, no ability to drop our heart rate and sleep through winter like a bear. Strip a person's clothing off in real cold, and survival is measured in hours. Mammoths had fur and fat, cave bears hibernated, reindeer just migrated. On paper, humans should have died out early. What we had instead was a brain built for planning and hands built for making what our bodies lacked. There was no single trick. It was a stack of overlapping solutions, starting with fire. Humans had used fire for 300,000 to 400,000 years by the worst of the cold. Ice Age fire pits excavated in Ukraine turned out to be deliberately engineered hearths, one burning at over 600 degrees Celsius, hotter than 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. When wood ran out, people burned rendered fat and bone instead. Fire supplied heat, cooked food, hardened tools, and stretched daylight through the darkest months of the year. Next came portability. Fire can't travel with you. So humans did what no other animal could. They took another animal's insulation and wore it as their own. Cut marks on bear paw bones in northern Europe show people were skinning bears for fur at least 300,000 years ago. But loose hides leak heat through every gap. The real fix arrived around 30,000 years ago. The sewing needle, a sliver of bone with a hole barely wide enough for thread. A needle means fitted clothing, sealed seams, layers, sleeves that close at the wrist. A blanket and a tailored coat are two different tools, and the needle turned one into the other. Some researchers think this may have given early modern humans an edge over Neanderthals. Hunters rubbed rendered animal fat across exposed skin to seal in warmth before heading out, and carved narrow slits into bone or wood to tie over their eyes against snow blindness, the first sunglasses on Earth. Shelter followed the same improvised logic. Forget everyone huddled permanently in a cave. Across the open plains of Ukraine and Russia, there were no caves and barely any wood, so people built with what was actually lying around: mammoth bone. At a site called Mezhyrich, archaeologists found round dwellings built almost entirely from mammoth bone, skulls anchoring the base, ribs and tusks curving into a frame, sometimes hundreds of bones per structure. The largest known example is roughly 18,000 years old and shows signs of repeated use across generations, among the oldest deliberate architecture ever found. Many had a sunken cold trap entryway, dug lower than the sleeping area, so cold air pooled there while warm air rose to where the family slept. They packed gaps with moss, mud, and pine pitch, and piled snow around shelters as insulation, since packed snow can hold an interior near freezing even as outside air drops far below zero. Staying warm keeps you alive for one night. Winter's slower killer is hunger, and here people got strategic. After a successful hunt, meat wasn't just eaten, it was banked. Cold did half the preservation work by freezing it naturally. The rest was smoked, dried, or packed into pits dug into permanently cold ground. Some groups even sank mammoth meat into cold ponds, a natural refrigerator that couldn't fail the way a modern freezer can. The hunting matched this stockpiling logic. Near a limestone outcrop in eastern France, hunters used coordinated fire and teamwork to drive whole herds of horses and reindeer into a natural trap at the same spot for tens of thousands of years. Here's the detail easy to overlook. These people expected winter, and their whole calendar revolved around preparing for it. We're the ones caught off guard by a storm, assuming the power comes back on. And they used each other as infrastructure. Far more people lived under one roof than any modern household would tolerate, because enough bodies clustered together generate real heat. It was disproportionately people living alone, especially the elderly, who died first in a hard cold snap, no one nearby to share warmth. None of this was peaceful, resources were brutally limited, and there's solid evidence that in the worst scarcity, some ancient humans turned to cannibalism as a last resort. People also borrowed heat directly from animals. In harsh medieval European winters, peasants kept livestock on the ground floor, letting the animal's body heat warm the family above. In some populations, the body itself adapted. The Yagan people at the tip of South America endured freezing conditions in minimal clothing, running a measurably hotter metabolism and using a deep squatting rest position to reduce heat loss. Their answer to the cold wasn't a coat, it was turning their own furnace up. Then there's the strangest possibility of all. At a Spanish site called Cima de los Huesos, researchers examined roughly 430,000-year-old remains showing cyclical bone damage and seasonal growth arrests, a pattern that resembles hibernation in other animals. Some researchers have proposed that populations without enough stored fat may have retreated into caves and entered something like deep dormancy to wait out the worst months. It's unsettled science, but the idea hasn't been ruled out. For hundreds of thousands of years, reaching spring was never guaranteed. Every winter was a test you could fail. In a stretch of time that barely registers on that timeline, we went from stacking mammoth skeletons into houses to tapping a button for instant heat. The deadliest force your ancestors ever faced is now something people grumble about on the walk to a heated car. We won that fight so completely, most of us forgot it was ever a war we were losing.